My mother got married 3 weeks after my father died in an accident. She became obsessed with her new husband's baby and tried to erase my father's memory. But when she forced us to choose between her and our grieving grandparents, my sister and I cut contact forever. And now she's telling the whole family that we abandoned her. I'm 22 years old. I've been working at a hardware store since I finished high school, and I need to tell this story because what happened with my mom basically destroyed what was left of our family. The thing is, I don't know if I'm the one who's wrong or if she really lost her mind. But after everything that happened, I don't think I even care to know anymore. I guess I should start from the beginning. When my parents got divorced, I was like 7 years old, and my sister Charlotte was 9. And honestly, I don't remember much about that because I was so young. But I do remember that my dad moved to a small apartment, and we stayed with my mom in the house. The first few years after the divorce were weird, but not terrible. I mean, we saw my dad on weekends, and he always made sure we had a good time, like he'd take us to the movies or out for burgers, stuff like that. My mom, on the other hand, seemed to be doing okay. She worked at an accounting office, and basically our life was normal, boring, even. Charlotte and I got along well most of the time. We fought like normal siblings, but nothing major. My dad never remarried or had more kids. I think he was still in love with my mom, even though he never said it directly. But you could tell by the way he looked at her when he came to pick us up. My mom, on the other hand, dated a couple of guys over the years, but nothing serious, until she met David. I was like 15 when David came into our lives. He was a quiet guy, kind of awkward. I didn't like or dislike him at first. He was just there. What I do remember perfectly is that David had a baby, Henry, who was like 8 or 9 months old at the time, and my mom became obsessed with that baby in a way that now, looking back, I should have seen as a red flag. I mean, I understand she was in love with David and wanted to get along with his son, but it was something more than that. It was like she had suddenly found the baby she always wanted to have or something. She spent hours talking about Henry, about how cute he was, how smart he was for his age. She literally couldn't have a conversation without mentioning something about that kid. Charlotte and I noticed, but we didn't think much of it. Like we thought it was just a phase, or that eventually it would pass. David moved in with us like 6 months after they started dating, and Henry came with him, obviously. My mom transformed the guest room into this super elaborate nursery, spent a ton of money on furniture and decorations, and started referring to Henry as my baby all the time, which I thought was weird because, he wasn't her biological baby. David didn't say anything. He was one of those guys who just accepts everything and doesn't create conflict, so I think for him, it was fine that my mom took on such an intense role with his son. What did start to bother me was that my mom expected Charlotte and me to treat Henry like our brother. Like she'd say things like, "Go play with your little brother," or "Help me change your little brother's diaper." And we were like, "No, this isn't our brother. He's your boyfriend's son." Things got more tense when my mom announced she was going to marry David. I was 17 at the time, and Charlotte was 19, and already in college. My dad was still an important part of our lives. We saw him often and had a good relationship with him. And I think that bothered my mom, even though she never said it directly. She planned this whole elaborate wedding for the summer. But then what changed everything happened. My dad died in a car accident like 2 months before the wedding. It was a Friday afternoon. I was at school when they called me to the principal's office, and when I got there, my mom was standing there with red eyes, and I knew before she said anything that something terrible had happened. The accident was on the highway. A semi lost control and crashed into several cars. My dad died instantly, according to what they told us later. He didn't suffer, but that doesn't make it hurt any less, The next few weeks were a blurry nightmare. Charlotte came back from college for the funeral. My paternal grandparents were obviously devastated because they had lost their only son, and I couldn't even process what had happened. I was 17 years old, about to graduate high school, and my dad wasn't going to be there to see it. My mom helped us with the funeral arrangements and all that, but there was something about her attitude that bothered me, like she was in a hurry to get it all over with and move on. I remember that a week after the funeral, I said something to her about postponing the wedding, like, "Obviously you're going to wait a little longer before getting married, right?" And she looked at me like I had said something offensive and said no, that the wedding was going ahead as planned, that life had to go on, and that my dad would have wanted her to be happy. I just stood there, not knowing what to say, because how do you respond to Something like that? My mom married David exactly 3 weeks after my dad's funeral. 3 weeks. She didn't even wait a month. Charlotte and I went to the wedding because we felt like we had no choice. But it was horrible. I was standing there at this supposedly happy event, while inside I was still processing that my dad had just died. My paternal grandparents obviously weren't invited, and when I asked my mom about that, she said it would be awkward for David, and that we needed to start this new stage of the family without the past interfering. The past. That's what she called my dad. As if he was something we could just leave behind and forget. After the wedding, things got worse quickly. My mom started imposing these weird rules about how we should interact with our paternal grandparents. She said that if we were going to visit them, Henry had to go with us because he was part of the family now too, and our grandparents needed to accept him. Charlotte and I told her that didn't make sense, that our grandparents had just lost their son and probably wanted to spend time with their grandchildren without having to deal with a stranger's kid who had no relationship with them. But my mom insisted. She said either we took Henry or we didn't go. Simple as that. I tried to explain that our grandparents were grieving, that they needed that time with us to feel connected to my dad, but she didn't want to listen. I remember she said something like, "If you're going to be part of this family, you have to accept all its members. You can't pick and choose." And I thought, but what family? The one you created 2 seconds after my dad died? The moment that really ruined everything was my dad's birthday, or what would have been his birthday. My grandparents organized a small gathering at their house, like something intimate to remember him, and my mom insisted that if Charlotte and I went, we had to bring David and Henry. I told her no, that this was about my dad, not about her new family. And she exploded. She yelled at me that I was selfish, that I was trying to exclude Henry from everything, that David was my stepfather now, and I needed to respect him, and that if I couldn't accept her new family, then maybe I shouldn't go anywhere. Charlotte was there when this happened and tried to calm the situation, but my mom got angry at her too. She accused both of us of being resentful because she had found happiness, as if that was the problem and not the fact that she was trying to replace our dead dad with a guy we barely knew. In the end, Charlotte and I went to our grandparents' house, without my mom, without David, and without Henry. It was a quiet afternoon. We looked at old photos of my dad. My grandma cooked his favorite food. We cried a little, laughed, remembering funny stories, and it was what we needed, you know? That space to process and remember without someone trying to force a new narrative on us. When I got home that night, my mom barely spoke to me. She gave me the silent treatment for days, and when she finally said something, it was to tell me that I had deeply disappointed her, that I was being cruel to Henry by not treating him like my brother, and that if I kept this up, I was going to destroy this family. I remember thinking, what family? You destroyed our family when you decided Dad was replaceable. Things kept getting worse over the next few months. My mom started acting like my dad had never existed. She took down all the photos of him from the house, packed away everything that reminded us of him in boxes in the basement, and started referring to David as your dad when talking to me, which made my blood boil. One day I came home and saw that she had removed this photo I had in my room of my dad and me when I was like 10 years old. And when I asked her where it was, she said she thought it would be better if we started decorating the house with photos of the new family, that clinging to the past wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy. As if remembering my dad was some kind of disease I needed to recover from. I turned 18 inches April, like 6 months after my dad died, and by that point, I had already made the decision that I needed to get out of that house. I had been dating my girlfriend Melissa for like a year. She had her own small apartment and offered to let me move in with her. It wasn't an easy decision because it meant leaving Charlotte alone, but she told me she understood, that she was also planning ways to spend less time at home. Melissa was amazing through all of this. She listened when I needed to vent, gave me space when I needed to be alone, and never made me feel guilty about what I was feeling. The day I told my mom I was moving out, I thought she'd be sad or at least try to convince me to stay, but instead she told me I was being dramatic, that I was running away from my responsibilities as Henry's older brother, and that eventually I was going to have to grow up and accept reality. I moved in with Melissa a week after I turned 18. I only took the essentials, my clothes, my laptop, some personal stuff, and the few photos of my dad I could rescue before my mom stored them away or threw them out. But the first few days were strange, like I felt guilty for leaving, but at the same time I felt lighter than I had in months. Like I could finally breathe without someone telling me how I should feel or who I should consider family. Melissa worked at a coffee shop, and I got more hours at the hardware store, where I was already working part-time, and we started building this quiet life together. Nothing glamorous, but it was ours, and that was enough. My mom didn't leave me alone after I moved out. At first, she tried the friendly approach, like sending messages asking how I was, saying she missed me, inviting me to Sunday dinners. But I kept the responses short and almost never went. After a month or so, her tone changed. She started sending more aggressive messages, saying I was a bad brother, that Henry asked about me, that I was hurting him by not being present, and that I needed to reconsider my priorities. I tried to ignore the messages, but she kept going and going, like she could send 10 messages in one day, and when I didn't respond, she'd leave long voicemails where she basically made me feel like the worst person in the world. The breaking point was when she showed up at my work. I was at the hardware store helping a customer when I suddenly saw her walk in, and I knew immediately she wasn't there to buy anything. She waited until I finished with the customer, and then came up and started talking to me right there, in front of everyone, about how I was abandoning the family, about how Henry needed me, about how she had given me everything, and this was how I was repaying her. I tried to stay calm and asked her to talk outside, but she raised her voice and started saying I was selfish, that Charlotte was also being selfish by distancing herself, that the two of us had decided to destroy her happiness because we couldn't get over the past. My boss had to intervene and ask her to leave, and after that I hid in the stockroom for half an hour trying to calm down because I felt like I was going to explode. That night my mom sent like 20 messages and left several voicemails, all basically saying the same thing, that I had no right to treat her like that after everything she had done for me I at least owed her respect, that Henry was my brother whether I liked it or not, and that if I couldn't accept that, then clearly I had serious problems I needed to deal with. She also said something about how my dad would be disappointed in me, which was like the last straw, using my dead dad to emotionally manipulate me. I didn't respond to any of the messages. 2 weeks later, she showed up at Melissa's apartment. She knocked on the door at like 9 on a Friday night. Melissa opened it, thinking it was the food we had ordered. And there was my mom. Melissa called me, and when I came to the door, my mom immediately started with her speech, that we needed to talk, that this had gone too far, that I was being immature and cruel. I told her I had nothing to talk to her about, that she needed to respect my space, and she laughed in this kind of manic way and said I didn't deserve to be in this family if I was going to keep acting like this, that she had tried to give me a fresh start and I had rejected it, and that Charlotte and I were eventually going to end up alone and miserable because we didn't know how to appreciate what we had. After that, she left, and I closed the door and just stood there not knowing what to feel. Like there was so much anger and sadness mixed together that I couldn't even process it. The next morning, I blocked my mom's number. I also blocked David because she had started sending messages from his phone. It was a difficult decision because part of me felt like maybe I was being too extreme, but Melissa helped me see that I needed those boundaries, that it wasn't healthy to have someone in my life who constantly made me feel guilty for processing my dad's death in my own way. Charlotte also blocked my mom around the same time. She had been going through similar situations at college, with mom showing up unannounced and making scenes. Like 3 months passed without any contact with my mom, and honestly, they were the most peaceful 3 months I'd had in years. Melissa and I started talking about future plans, like maybe taking some classes at community college, saving for a better car, normal things that people our age do. Charlotte would come visit us when she had free time from college, and we talked a lot about everything that had happened, about how we were both dealing with losing Dad, and with the fact that our mom had basically chosen her new family over us. It was healing in a way, like being able to talk to someone who had lived through exactly the same thing and who understood without me having to explain every detail. About 2 months ago, my Aunt Barbara, my mom's sister, contacted me. She had always been neutral in all this, like she didn't take sides and maintained relationships with everyone, and she asked if we could get coffee. I went because I had always liked her and because I was curious about what she wanted to tell me. We sat at a coffee shop near my work and she got straight to the point. She told me that my mom had been telling her version of the whole story to the family, saying that Charlotte and I had abandoned her after the wedding, that we were bad children who couldn't accept her happiness, that we had forbidden her to see our paternal grandparents when in reality she was the one who set impossible conditions, and that basically she was the victim in this whole situation. My Aunt Barbara made it clear that she didn't completely believe that version of events, but she told me she wanted to hear my side. I told her everything, from the beginning. From how Mom became obsessed with Henry, how she got married 3 weeks after Dad died, how she tried to erase all evidence that Dad had existed, how she forced us to choose between our relationship with our paternal grandparents and her new family, and how she finally showed up at my work and at my apartment making scenes. My aunt listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she simply nodded and said it made sense, that she had noticed changes in my mom after meeting David but hadn't wanted to get involved. She told me that my mom was probably going to keep telling her version of the story, and that I had to be prepared for some relatives to take her side, but that she personally understood why Charlotte and I had distanced ourselves. Last week I saw Charlotte. She came to spend the weekend at the apartment, and we talked at length about all this. I told her what my aunt had said about how Mom was painting the story, and Charlotte told me she had also heard similar versions from other relatives. We wondered if our mom was ever going to really understand why we pulled away, if she was ever going to see that she was the one who pushed us away, not the other way around. Charlotte said something that stuck with me. She said that maybe Mom genuinely believes her own version of the story, that maybe in her mind she really is the victim and we're the villains, and that she's probably never going to change that narrative because admitting the truth would be admitting that she destroyed her relationship with her own children for a man she barely knew and a baby that wasn't hers. Now I'm 22 years old, still working at the same hardware store, though I've moved up in position. Still living with Melissa and things between us are going well, and I maintain regular contact with Charlotte and my paternal grandparents. I go to their house every 2 weeks or so. I bring them photos I have of Dad. We talk about him. We keep his memory alive in the way my mom never let us do in her house. My grandparents are older now. My grandpa is like 73 and my grandma is 70. And every time I see them, I realize how important it is for them to have that connection with us. We're all they have left of their son. I don't know if someday I'm going to have a conversation with my mom about all this. Honestly, I don't know if I want to. Part of me is still angry. Another part is sad about what we lost. And there's a small part that still wonders if maybe we could have handled things differently. Though rationally, I know we did what we had to do to protect our mental health. Charlotte told me a few days ago that she's at peace with the decision to distance herself, that she doesn't regret it, and I think I'm getting to the same point. I don't hate my mom, but I don't miss her either. And that seems like the saddest part of all this to me, that I got to a point where her absence is more comfortable than her presence. Melissa asked me yesterday if I thought my Mom would ever really reach out to me, like not to make me feel guilty, but to genuinely try to repair the relationship, and I told her I didn't know. What I do know is that if that day comes, she's going to have to accept certain things, that my dad was important and his memory matters, that Henry isn't my brother just because she decides it, that Charlotte and I had the right to process our grief without being forced into a new and uncomfortable family dynamic, and that what she did was wrong. I don't know if she's capable of admitting that. Honestly, I don't think she is, but I guess time will tell.